Welcome back to the Barrel Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. The NBA season is officially over, and we are now starting to get into the official off season. Got the draft in about a week and a half, I want to say. It's a 2-day event now. And then we got free agency. Apparently, there's a new rule where teams can negotiate right away as soon as the season ends with their guys, like a Pascal Siakam or Tyrese Maxey. You can see those guys get extended anywhere before the draft, or it could just start at free agency. I just saw Windhorst talking about that a couple days ago, saying it's a new rule implemented this year. Basically gives teams the ability to talk to their guys first before the whole free agency period starts. That usually starts a couple days after the draft. But in this episode, we're going to be really breaking down kind of free agency destinations for a lot of the top name free agents. I got a couple guys, good amount of players here that are free agents this offseason. I feel like it's going to be interesting to talking about their best fits and on these different teams, and if they think they should take the player option, opt out, different kind of things like that. But before we get into it, make sure you guys leave a like on the video. Helps the channel out a ton. If you're an audio listener, it should be easy to follow along. I will have graphics posted all on our socials, on X, on IG, to kind of help follow along with the episode. But going into this, we're going to start out with LeBron James. Has a player option, $51.4 million. In my mind, I just feel like it's super, super hard for me to think that LeBron James is really going to leave LA at this point. I still feel like the roster is probably in a way better spot this year to make significant moves, to really bolster this team into a championship window again. And when I'm really looking at the Lakers as a championship contending team, when I'm looking at them from an unbiased lens, from somebody who's not just hating on the Lakers for them being the Lakers have been able to beat everybody in the Western Conference but the Denver Nuggets. When you look at it, they went to the conference finals, beat the Golden State Warriors and the Memphis Grizzlies, going to the conference finals, and then they lost to a Denver Nuggets team. This past year, they lost to the Denver Nuggets. So, other than the Denver Nuggets, I feel like the Lakers are equipped to beat any other team in the Western Conference if fully healthy. And with their roster, they have the 17th pick this year. They have a second rounder this year as well. They have some interesting contracts that could be put on top of one another to make a big possible trade. But in terms of LeBron James and what I feel like, I do think he ends up staying with LA. I think he takes the player option and signs maybe another 1+1 like LeBron always does with LA. But in terms of best fits, obviously, Lakers are going to be at the top of the list in terms of LeBron James. But I do have some other teams that I do think are really, really good fits for LeBron James if the improbable happens and we see LeBron James go to a different team and opt out and become a free agent. Obviously, the 76ers are at the top of that list. When you're looking at cap space, I have teams with all cap space right here. Philadelphia 76ers have a lot of cap space to be able to use, pairing LeBron up with a Joel Embiid and a Tyrese Maxey. And another outside option is the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors and LeBron James, because he always wants to play with Steph Curry. I just feel like it's an interesting situation for LeBron James. Do I think he's going to leave LA? Absolutely not. I think he will be a Laker and retire a Laker. I feel like there's so much for him just in LA outside of basketball in general. So I feel like there's no way LeBron James leaves LA. But in terms of the two other best fits and teams I feel like do see is the 76ers and the Golden State Warriors. I think both situations just make sense over there for LeBron as well. But I do think he ends up staying with LA, probably taking that player option and doing a little 1+1. But I just feel like he's to the point in his career where I don't think he goes and tries to kind of, start something new in a way. And I feel like he's just going to end up staying in LA. They're probably going to get the coach he wants. They have a lot of avenues to really bolster up the roster, get a deeper roster, which is what they've been reported to do. And I feel like they have a lot of different avenues and contracts to kind of make that happen this offseason. Next player, Paul George. This is an interesting one because he has a player option, $48.8 million. But if I'm looking at Paul George, I feel like, yes, he wants to stay in LA. But if you're Paul George, you're like, why haven't I been extended yet? And I feel like when both parties have come with the Paul George and the Clippers, contract negotiations haven't really been eye to eye from reports. So looking at this, I feel like it's at his point in his career, Paul George, I feel like, wants to opt out and just sign a long-term contract. With his injury history, it would be tough for him to go into a year at his age Not saying he's declining by any means, but with injury history as well, to go into a year where it's kind of like a prove a year, basically. Like, you're going to take the player option beyond 1 year when you want that security of having a long-term contract. I mean, but this is Paul George's possibly last chance to get that last long-term deal. And I think there's a world where the Clippers are looking at life beyond Paul George. If I'm personally Paul George, I think he opts out. I would be looking to go get a bag from another team, honestly. Because the Clippers are not willing to extend you with a Kawhi Leonard, I just feel like Paul George is somebody that's going to really want that long-term deal, and if the Clippers are not going to offer you that long-term deal, then I would be looking to go elsewhere. I think the best fits for Paul George in free agency are the 76ers. I think it's a match made in heaven. I think the Sixers have the cap space to make it work. Now, from the 76ers point of view, getting a Paul George and using a big bulk of that cap space on Paul George is a risk, obviously, when they have the ability to completely change the entire roster around Joel Embiid. But when you're talking about Paul George next to a Tyrese Maxey, next to a Joel Embiid, that is a phenomenal big three of pieces that all fit together really well. Paul George can be that super upgrade of Tobias Harris that can give you everything from the 3 or the 4 spot, giving you elite level defense, being able to be a 3-level scorer, play, make, do everything for you. Pairing him up to Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid will be great, and it'd be a crazy thing to see in the Eastern Conference. And the only other second really best fit is the Clippers. I like, if the Clippers want to extend him this offseason, I think it's still a good fit. I think him and Kawhi Leonard, I mean, barring any injuries, I still feel like they're one of the best teams in the league when they're fully healthy. But looking at Paul George, the best fits in my eyes, I still feel like it's going to be the Clippers and the 76ers. All the other teams that I feel like are rumored to be interested, just really, it doesn't make sense. Like the Cavs have to be going through a bunch of trades to make it happen. Orlando still, I feel like it's too young for Paul George to want to be interested in going there. I've heard some ramblings about like the Warriors, but I just feel like that's another situation where they're going to have to trade their way up to a Paul George, and then they're going to have to want to extend him. And I just feel like they're past the realm of like an aging star kind of getting on these already older teams and kind of them trying to make a run and make a push. I just feel like those days are done. So I feel like the only two best fits for Paul George are the 76ers and the Clippers, because 76ers have the cap space to make it work and to give him that long-term deal he wants, and the Clippers can just extend him. Next one, Klay Thompson, unrestricted free agent. This is another big one. A lot of drama the past couple of days about the whole unfollowing the team and everything else like that. But looking at it this way, tough end of last season. I feel like Klay Thompson post All-Star break was really starting to find his stride again. He's kind of really just been inconsistent, up and down, up and down. They're going to really look and magnify that play-in game performance against the Kings. But I feel like overall, when you look at the stats, Klay Thompson is still kind of the Klay Thompson we saw pre-injury in terms of just stats and numbers wise. The only thing that's not really there is the elite level defense, but the shooting is still always going to be there, and shooting in this league is at a high premium, especially Klay Thompson, who's 6'7", 6'8", that can still defend decently and space the floor for you. He's still going to have a very, very, very high market. So looking at this, the best fits I see for Klay Thompson, obviously the Golden State Warriors. You could always just come back. I feel like this is also a situation where he's going to test his market, but he's always just going to knew in the back of his mind he was going to come back to the Warriors. He's been there so long to the point where it's like, do you really see him leaving and finishing his career somewhere else besides the Warriors? That's another discussion to be had. Next fit I see is the 76ers. The 76ers are going to be on here a lot because they're one of the only teams that has two superstars. Well, I guess Joel Embiid's an MVP caliber player, and Tyrese Maxey is like on his way to superstardom. I have the 76ers. They have a ton of cap to use to go get a Klay Thompson. He fits this team perfectly. It makes me think of like a Joel Embiid when they had JJ Redick and do those handoffs like that, with a Klay Thompson who is just a bigger shooter, can shoot over people better than JJ Redick can, and can defend better than JJ Redick could. So looking at this, I think the 76ers are a great fit for Klay Thompson, because they could easily add Klay Thompson and go add other pieces around him. They're not getting Klay Thompson and be like, all right, he's our third star, right? They're not thinking of that mindset. With the 76ers, they have the cap space to add a Klay Thompson and then go get somebody else or another person. So like, Klay Thompson could be a real nice piece for the 76ers. Gives them spacing and defense and shooting. I just feel like he's somebody that can be a perfect off-ball threat off of Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And then the last best fit I have for Klay Thompson is Orlando Magic. It's obviously been rumored he kind of fits what they want to do. He's somebody that can still defend and he can space the floor. And this is the Orlando Magic team that, yes, is very, very young, but having somebody with a championship pedigree like Klay Thompson could kind of gear this team up to being a consistent playoff threat. And he gives them the spacing they desperately, desperately need, because when you look at the Orlando Magic, they just struggle to shoot the ball, and getting an elite level shooter like Klay Thompson that can still defend and still do a little bit of everything, can play off of a Franz and Apollo and whatever else they want to get on this team this offseason with the Orlando Magic, because they still have a good amount of cap. While I'm looking at it right now, it's like $49 million. So they could add Klay Thompson and go add even more shooting, which is what I think this team desperately needs. But I still feel like the Orlando Magic maybe is still like kind of like the Paul George thing, where like I love the fit with the Klay Thompson, but I just feel like they still might be a little too young with it, if they added a Klay Thompson to really make a deeper push in the playoffs than what they did this year. I love the fit with Klay Thompson, but I feel like they could go in a different direction and possibly get somebody younger that can give them that shooting and spacing that they need. But best fits I have for Klay Thompson: Warriors, 76ers, Orlando. Those are kind of the three teams I've seen to be rumored. Next one, Tobias Harris. He's an unrestricted free agent, someone who is possibly looking for another payday like he did get from the 76ers way back when. This is interesting because I feel like his value is so weird to where I could see a team that's just trying to like compete, make the play-in, be better than they were last year, could pay somebody like Tobias Harris, and he can be somebody that can just do a little bit of everything for them: score, defend, rebound. Like, he fits on a lot of these teams that just are looking for somebody that can just make them a little bit more competitive. The best fits I have, because I just don't feel like Philadelphia is going to bring him back, and I don't think they want him back. Best fits is Charlotte. I feel like when you're looking at Charlotte, they're kind of, I know the Hornets, they're kind of like building a new regime around what they got going on. But when I'm looking at the Charlotte Hornets team, when I think about them adding a Tobias Harris, I think he fits well with a LaMelo Ball, somebody who can set him up easier, and next to a Brandon Miller. I mean, Tobias Harris is somebody who can do a little bit of everything, and I feel like you add another kind of do-it-all kind of guy with a LaMelo Ball, and a Brandon Miller can kind of make the Hornets more competitive. And I think that's at the point in time where they need to be looking to do, even if you like may so overpay for like 2 or 3 years, like who you're not bringing in any like superstar level talent into Charlotte anytime soon. So like we're looking at that, you're just looking to be competitive and to compete, to get to a level to where you're good enough to attract a superstar, if that makes sense. But right now they're not at that point where they're attracting anybody where I'm like franchise changing guy, right? But Tobias Harris could be a good fitting piece for the Charlotte Hornets. Next team I have is the Detroit Pistons, going back there. Same kind of thing, flipping it with the Hornets and the Pistons. They're just in a position where like they need to relieve some pressure off Cade Cunningham when it comes to scoring the ball and being a shot creator. I think Tobias Harris could do that, could do a little bit of everything for them. And they kind of have a lacking hole at that like 4-3 realm, to where like, yes, they could draft somebody, but this team is already super, super young, to where like they might just need more NBA-ready guys. Like, their main mock has been, like, Matas Buzelis, but, like, even he's more of a project play, and I feel like he's not really going to be the greatest year one. I think he'll be a lot better towards the back half of that rookie contract, but, like, looking at that, Tobias Harris has come in and help them right away. I mean, they're in the point now where, like, they're looking to extend Cade Cunningham, and, like, they just need to get him some more help and be trying to just be more competitive. When I'm looking at these rosters like the Hornets and the Pistons, they've been bad for so long. It feels like I see why they're bad, because you can't just throw young talent on the floor in the NBA and expect it to work and expect them to develop the right way. Because when you look at a team like Houston, for example, who was in this realm with the Pistons and the Hornets like a year ago, they added some NBA ready guys, some veteran role players, and a Fred VanVleet who they overpaid for, and a Dillon Brooks who they overpaid for, possibly. And just them two alone, on top of like a Jeff Green, completely changed how people view the Houston Rockets. And I feel like the Hornets and the Pistons are just in that realm where they're just trying to change how people view the team. And they're trying to just be more competitive and compete for like possibly a play-in berth. So looking at that, I think Tobias Harris are the two best fits for them, especially because those are two teams I could see overpaying for somebody like Tobias Harris, because he fits on both those rosters. And the last team is more so like a desperation kind of pick, depending on what the Cleveland Cavaliers do this offseason. They have a gaping hole at that 3 spot. Gaping hole at that 3 spot. I mean, I think Tobias Harris is like somebody who you plug in at that 3 spot who can do a little bit of everything. He can fit with whatever lineup you want to go out there. He can shoot. Like I said, he can do a little bit of everything. He might not do anything super elite that you would want. But for a Cavs team, like if they are trying to reshape their roster, give their roster a new look, they need to address that 3 spot. That small forward spot has been something that they haven't been able to address ever since getting a Donovan Mitchell and a Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. So looking at that, I mean, they're in a realm where, like, worst comes to worst, you could possibly try to go get a Tobias Harris on the market, and especially if you can't get anybody else. So Tobias Harris, I think the best fits are the Hornets, Pistons, and the Cavs. Next up, James Harden. See, this was one of the hardest ones to even think about because it's just James Harden. So, like, looking at him, like what, let me know in the comments, like, what is James Harden's value on the open market? Like, what's his, I still feel like James Harden has a lot left in the tank, but it's like, it's so situation based for James Harden, right? Unrestricted free agent. I don't see him going to like a younger team. If he does leave the Clippers, I feel like he's going to go somewhere where he can compete for a title because that's just at the point he is in his career. So looking at this, I just feel like he might be willing to take a pay cut somewhere. I don't see like that's like, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'm crazy for thinking Harden's going to take a pay cut or anything else to go to a different team and compete for a title like that. But looking at this, I only really have 2 best fits for James Harden. Obviously, the Clippers, he could just go back to the Clippers, re-sign, re-up for a couple of years, probably pair him up with a Kawhi Leonard contract, possibly get James Harden on a cheaper, more team-friendly deal to kind of build around the roster the right way. And then the next team I have is the only team I think that makes sense. Is another team that could be striking out in the trade market that could be in the realm to possibly get James Harden, and that's the Pelicans. The Pelicans are looking for a real true point guard, somebody who can really facilitate. I love CJ McCollum, but I love him more as a 2 guard rather than a 1 guard. Looking at the Pelicans, I mean, you could have James Harden surrounded by shooting and defenders like a Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Alvarado, CJ McCollum, obviously a Zion. This trade probably only works if you get off of Brandon Ingram's contract, which I think they're going to end up doing because I don't think they're going to extend him. If they were going to extend him, they would have done it already. But the only 2 best fits I see for James Harden is the Clippers and the Pelicans. I feel like both situations need that kind of facilitating point guard to set their stars up. And I feel like if you look at the Clippers, obviously he can just go back to the Clippers, like I said, re-up with Kawhi Leonard. But the Pelicans are a very intriguing, interesting situation because James Harden can really elevate this team with his playmaking ability and having a Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, CJ McCollum, and they still have a ton of young guys off that bench, and they still have the draft pick this year, first rounder. So looking at that, that could be an interesting spot for James Harden. And if he were to leave the Clippers, I think the Pelicans could be a very, very good position for him. And I think if you're the Pelicans, adding somebody like James Harden could really change your look on the team. Because looking at that, like I said, I don't see CJ McCollum being the best playmaker in the world. But when I see Harden, I think Harden could easily go to the Pelicans and put up at least 17, 18, and 10, 12. Especially if you have a healthy Zion Williamson, with the CJ McCollum and all the defensive pieces and the shooting that they already have on that Pelicans team, it could just give this Pelicans team a new look at the point guard position, especially because they've been linked to DeJounte Murray, Darius Garland. I feel like Harden still, I would probably rather have Harden over Darius Garland. Let me know in the comments if that's a hot take. As of right now, if I'm the Pelicans, I've seen them linked to Darius Garland. I think I'd rather have James Harden. I think James Harden is just easier kind of to hide on the defensive side of the ball because he is a bigger guard compared to Darius Garland. You're going to already just walk into a smaller backcourt and Darius Garland and CJ McCollum if they were to make that kind of trade. And then DeJounte Murray is somebody that they could trade for, but you got to think DeJounte Murray's contract is pretty big over the next couple of years. So it depends on what the contract James Harden does get on the open market. But I think the Pelicans and the Clippers are 2 interesting spots for James Harden. Next one, this is kind of a quick, super simple one. Pascal Siakam, kind of grouped this in with Tyrese Maxey. They're probably going to get extended by their own teams. Pascal Siakam, unrestricted free agent. I expect the Pacers to give him a super, super big payday because they don't make it to the conference finals without him for sure. He is a perfect fit next to Tyrese Haliburton in this team. I'm interested to see what he does get for a contract. But I do feel like the Pacers are in the realm to give him a very long-term deal. And then a backdoor team to where crazy scenario if he were to ever leave the leave the Pacers this offseason. 76ers have a ton of cap space to go try to make a trade, make a signing out for him. So looking at that, Pascal Siakam, I just expect him to be back with the Pacers. Next one, OG Anunoby. Some interesting reports actually came out about this today. They're talking about how he's not wowed away by the Knicks offer. But I feel like the Knicks gave up too much for him. And I think they're still trying to work out their cap situation to try to go make a trade for like a Mikal Bridges and bring back an OG Anunoby and possibly an Isaiah Hartenstein. So there's a lot going on in New York, which is a good thing to have for them. But I just feel like he's going to opt out and he's going to just get paid by the Knicks. His agent is like a relative of somebody in the front office, from what I've heard. So like looking at this, I just feel like they've given up too much and they're going to end up paying him because he is the X factor for this team. If he's healthy, you can argue that they just get rid of the Pacers in the second round and they go into the conference finals. But with his injury, a lot of things happen. So looking at OG, I think the best fits are obviously the New York Knicks. I think he's going to get paid. And another outside team, if he doesn't go to the New York Knicks, I feel like is the OKC Thunder. Kind of looking to upgrade that Lou Dort position. They have a ton of cap space to do it. He's younger. He fits their timeline more. He can get, for this OKC team, adding the probably top 5 3-and-D player in all of basketball and OG Anunoby to that team with what they already have working could be scary hours for the Western Conference. But the two best fits I have for OG Anunoby, obviously the New York Knicks, which I think that is the most likely situation, and then the OKC Thunder, kind of like a backdoor possibility just because they have the money. But I feel like they're going to look to address the big spot more than the wings position as well, because they still have a lottery pick this year as well. So looking at this next one, DeMar DeRozan, unrestricted free agent. I think somebody who could definitely be in the market to go look to join a contender. Just because he's an unrestricted free agent, he could be at this point in career where he is kind of looking for a smaller deal to try to go possibly get on a team that wants to compete. But I do still think I like him in Chicago, where like if I woke up one morning during free agency and I saw he went back to Chicago on like a 2-3 year deal, I wouldn't be like super shocked. I think he does fit with what they're doing and the young talent that they have going on there with Kobe White, Dosunmu. Don't know what they're doing with Patrick Williams. They have the 11th overall pick. You're looking at Lonzo Ball coming back. Like, who knows what they're going to do with Zach LaVine. They have a lot of moving parts to where, like, when you see, like, people talk about the Bulls and what they should do this offseason, it's like, oh, they need to blow it up. But, like, I get trading Zach LaVine, trading Vucevic. I think DeMar DeRozan fits what they want to do. He's a great veteran to have to kind of help grow your young talent. And I feel like, kind of like I said with the Pistons and the Hornets earlier, like, the Bulls are entering this like weird kind of, they're kind of like their young guy and Kobe White, it seems like, from this year. They have a lottery pick as well. Dosunmu's good. They have a lot of guys that they can turn into enter a full-on rebuild. But then it's like, it's kind of like you don't want to get into a position where like your roster is only filled out with young talent, if you know what I mean. So like you don't want to get into that position. I feel like having a DeMar DeRozan, if DeMar DeRozan wants to come back to Chicago on like a 2-3 year deal, like I said, not mad about it at all. He's the one guy out of Zach LaVine and Vuce and DeMar, like, he's the one guy if I'm Chicago where I'm like, okay, if DeMar DeRozan, we have him for another 2 to 3 years, perfectly fine with it. He fits what they want to do. And with DeMar DeRozan, the other best fits I have for him is obviously the Bulls, which I just got done explaining. 76ers, obviously, I feel like they could use a go-to scorer like a DeMar DeRozan, somebody who can play off of Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey very well. Obviously, he doesn't space the floor like you would want, like a Klay Thompson, for example, like I talked about earlier. But DeMar DeRozan can still be a go-to scorer who has rarely improved his playmaking since he's gotten to Chicago. And then the last team I have for a best fit is a team who desperately needs a go-to scorer. It's going to be hard for them to make the cap situation work. This is kind of like DeMar kind of taking a smaller term deal to kind of go to a contender. I think the Memphis Grizzlies could definitely use somebody like a DeMar DeRozan. Obviously, kind of the spacing would be a question, but I feel like what you have, Desmond Bane, who can shoot the ball at a high clip, Jaren Jackson Jr., who's a big that can space the floor, John Morant, who has improved as a three-point shooter, him coming off of an injury. I think DeMar DeRozan could be that perfect small forward piece that they kind of been lacking over the past couple of years, even when they were good before they had this down year. to be that go-to scorer outside of a John Morant. I feel like there's times where even when this Grizzlies team was fully healthy and good, like there's just times where it was like, if John Morant isn't making things happen, the offense is really stagnant. And I feel like DeMar DeRozan could be that calming force at that 3 or 4 spot, depending on what lineup they have out there, to kind of relieve some pressure offensively for this team and be a go-to guy that you can throw the ball to in the mid-post, and he can just go to work and be able to play, make out the post, and be kind of that offensive hub that they kind of need. I feel like they need somebody else that they could really trust with the ball to go get a bucket late in games, because I feel like they're still a very, very young team, but DeMar DeRozan, pairing him up with like Marcus Smart, John Morant, Desmond Bane, Triple J, they have the 9th overall pick. They can go like Donovan Clingan there, Ron Holland if they want to add another wing. So they have a lot of different options for them. I feel like the best 3 fits for DeMar DeRozan: Chicago Bulls, 76ers, Memphis Grizzlies. I feel like those all 3 make sense. Next one, Chris Paul. So let me explain the Chris Paul contract. So he has a $30 million non-guaranteed left for this last year with the Warriors. They can either simply wash their hands with this or have him get that $30 million to use in a trade. So, and if he does get used in a trade, it could be to a team that just looks at it and be like, hey, Chris Paul, we just needed to get off this contract or whatever. We're going to buy you out, wash our hands with this situation. He can become a free agent. That's why he's on this list. Or if the Warriors want to do that themselves and not trade him, they could wash their hands with the situation and be like, Chris Paul, we don't want to pay you $30 million. Cool. You're a free agent now. So looking at this, I have 4 best fits for him. They're all contending teams. First one, obviously the Lakers. I think Chris Paul to the Lakers just makes sense with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. He can kind of be that perfect fitting guard that they kind of need. They kind of need a guard that fits. I like D'Lo, but I don't think he fits with what the Lakers really want to do. I think Chris Paul, even at his age, can give them really solid production. Next fit I have is the Denver Nuggets. Super interesting, depending on what kind of contract Chris Paul does get if he does hit the open market. But Denver is a team where you're like, if they have more of a steady-minded point guard off that bench, somebody who can elevate the younger guys they do have off that bench, it could be very interesting. I think Denver is a very interesting situation for Chris Paul. Pelicans kind of going back to where it all started in a way, where a team that desperately needs a point guard. I know I talked about them having kind of like a smaller backcourt in terms of they had Chris Paul, CJ McCollum, but it's interesting to see the Pelicans that desperately need a point guard, and Chris Paul could be a desperately cheaper option than some of the guys on the market that they could eventually get. And then the last one is the 76ers. I mean, pairing him up with Tyrese Maxey in that backcourt could be interesting, or having Chris Paul come off the bench, depending on what they do with like a DeAnthony Melton situation. Having him in the pick and roll with Joel Embiid at times and stretches throughout the game could be very interesting. But Chris Paul is a guy at this point in his career, from somebody who watched him a lot when he did play for the Warriors. He still has great value. I just don't think he's at the point in his career now where he's giving you like 25 to 35 minutes a night, because he wasn't doing that with the Warriors. I think he's somebody that can really kind of raise your floor in a way, especially off that bench and running a second unit, and possibly be even starting at certain times depending on how his minutes work and depending on what contract he does get. But I feel like the best 4 fits for Chris Paul are the Lakers, Denver Nuggets, Pelicans, and the 76ers. The next guy on here is Buddy Hield, unrestricted free agent. Coming off of a down back half of the year after being traded, I'm not going to take crazy stock into that. I still feel like he's one of the best three-point shooters in all basketball, but like when he came to the 76ers, it was like Joel Embiid wasn't healthy. They had a lot going on with the team. And then what Joel Embiid did get healthy come playoff time, and Buddy Hield kind of fell out of the rotation in the playoffs. So like I still feel like Buddy Hield's value is still going to be relatively high just because he's such a great shooter. And I'm not going to take crazy stock into that back half of the season. Best fits for Buddy Hield, Detroit Pistons. I feel like they have a lack of shooting over there on that roster, and all the cap space they do have, I feel like Buddy Hield could get a little bit of a payday from the Detroit Pistons. Next one, 76ers, you could obviously just run it back, bring him back with all the cap space they do have as well, and be like, all right, we're going to have a full year with you, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey. Not saying that like Buddy Hield's like the third star on the team, but bringing him back with his spacing ability could be good for the 76ers. Last team I have for a good fit, Orlando Magic, kind of like what I talked about earlier with like the Magic having interest in a Klay Thompson, but if it doesn't work out, kind of going with a similar but different option in a Buddy Hield that could be a lot cheaper than a Klay Thompson that can kind of give you that kind of same level of production, even if they want to go like off that bench or starting 5. They just need to add that kind of spacing that Buddy Hield can't provide. Next one, Malik Monk. Unrestricted free agent. The Kings can't pay him kind of the max money that other teams can. So it's going to be very interesting to see if they can bring him back. I would love to see him back with the Kings personally, because I just feel like he really turned his career around with the Sacramento Kings. I feel like it's a perfect fit. He's being able to play off of De'Aaron Fox perfectly when they do play together, and he's sixth man of the year caliber. Like, he's somebody that the Kings desperately need to have on their roster. But Malik Monk could look to go get paid, which I completely understand. I got 3 great fits that I feel like could work for him. I feel like the Memphis Grizzlies work if they were able to make the money work. So looking at them, they just need some more scoring, some more spacing, some more shooting, some more shot creation. Just somebody that you look at can give the ball other than a John Morant and Desmond Bane and be like, hey, we need to go get a bucket here. Or somebody that can space the floor, play with a John Morant, if you know what I mean. So looking at that, I like the Memphis Grizzlies has a good fit for Malik Monk. I also like the San Antonio Spurs. Their team, when you look at their mock draft situation, at 4 and 8, some mocks have like a Rob Dillingham. I personally like a Stephon Castle and a Ron Holland at those 2 picks, and then you add kind of a more proven scorer in a Malik Monk that you could have start with a Wemby that can give that spacing and give you guys another real true shot creator over there in San Antonio, while not having to use either one of those draft picks on like kind of somebody you can, kind of a player that you can just go get and pay in Malik Monk, who I think is still. I think Malik Monk would go to the Spurs and start. I think he would. I think he would start perfectly fine next to Wemby. He's somebody that is a guard that can just go get his own. And I feel like on the Spurs team, they don't really have that outside of Devin Vassell. It's going to be interesting to see what they do this offseason. But I like the fit with Malik Monk in San Antonio, and they do have a decent amount of cap space to go out there and pay him the money that he probably wants. Last one is the Orlando Magic, shooting and spacing. Kind of the same theme here with all the Orlando Magic best fits. They just need shooting, they need spacing. They could use another shot creator like a Malik Monk alongside Apollo and a Franz on that perimeter. Especially if you're looking at Malik Monk. Malik Monk could start for you because you already have Cole Anthony kind of being that 6th man off the bench, and I feel like that's a perfect place for him. And then you could add that guard outside. You can go like maybe a point guard you get out of the draft or whatever. Him, Malik Monk, Franz, Paolo, Wendell Carter, and you still have a pretty young, deep bench that you can work with. But Malik Monk is that perfect option that gives you that shooting and spacing that they need. Next one, KCP has a player option of $15.4 million. It's going to be very interesting and important for the Denver Nuggets and how important he is to that starting 5 over there in Denver. I think it would be a steal if he opted into that player option, but I feel like he's still at the point in his career. I feel like he's still an all-world defender, especially at his position. I think he could look to get another payday. I really, really do. I think the 2 best fits, I obviously still have Denver in that realm for KCP, but the other best fits I have are the 76ers and the Cleveland Cavaliers. 2 guys that can just use spacing and defense. You could put KCP at that, depending on what they do. Maybe you have Donovan Mitchell and you move off of Darius Garland. Maybe KCP is the perfect fitting piece at that 2 spot next to a Donovan Mitchell. Even then, I feel like you're at the realm where like that front court is so good defensively to where like you could probably live with KCP being a little undersized at that 3 position. And then 76 is kind of the same thing. He's just another guy that can space the floor and defend next to a Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. That's kind of the system I'm thinking of here. But KCP is going to be interesting. He has that player option. It's going to be interesting to see what Denver does with that because he is a very, very big piece to what they do. And I don't think Christian Braun, even though as good as he has been off that bench, I don't know shooting-wise if he is ready to be in that starting lineup yet. He has the props hustle-wise and defensively, but I don't know if they were to lose KCP if he's ready shooting and spacing-wise to hop into the starting lineup. Because when you see teams and how they compete with the Denver Nuggets, they dare Aaron Gordon to beat them from 3. And having a starting lineup where you're daring Christian Braun and Aaron Gordon and really clogging the paint because Christian Braun isn't really the best consistent 3-point shooter at this point in his career yet. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do with KCP and what happens with that player option. Next one, D'Angelo Russell also has a player option. Could opt in, but I think he kind of could be looking for a longer deal. Didn't come off of a bad year whatsoever. I just feel like playing in LA isn't the easiest thing in the world, especially when you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis on your team. So looking at that, I could see him wanting to leave LA, and the Lakers could also use this to be like, okay, you opt in, we trade you, move you off somewhere else using that $18.7 million in a trade, which I have like kind of done in like kind of previous episodes, kind of doing one trade for every team. So I could see both sides for D'Lo, but I just don't feel like he's going to be on the roster next year for the Lakers. I think it's just a weird fit. So looking at this, best fits in kind of like a pseudo trade, or he doesn't opt into the deal kind of situation. I like Brooklyn. I feel like he had some of his best years in Brooklyn. And I feel like they're going to be in this position to where like they could be looking for like somebody like D'Lo to just come in, get kind of paid for a couple of years to kind of be on the roster and kind of help the development of like a Cam Thompson and Nick Claxton and any of the rookies they do draft in the future. I like the Spurs. It could be a crazy take for me. D'Lo doesn't scream like he's a San Antonio Spurs guy. But looking at it, I feel like the Spurs, pairing him with a Wemby, I feel like D'Angelo Russell and Wemby in the pick and roll could be easy. He can kind of be like that. Okay, the Spurs kind of struck out on Darius Garland, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray. They struck out on all the high-profile guards that they kind of wanted and were in the market for. And then you're looking at their first 2 draft picks, and board didn't fall to where like they get their like franchise point guard. I wouldn't be mad if you're the Spurs and you go out and you're like, okay, we'll go pay D'Angelo Russell for like a couple years to just kind of be our point guard. Because I like him better than Trey Jones at that point guard spot. I feel like D'Angelo Russell can space the floor and do way more offensively than Trey Jones can. And obviously, Trey Jones at this point is a better defender than D'Angelo Russell for sure. But you're pairing him up with Wemby. You're caring about the Victor Wembanyama development. I feel like getting Wemby somebody that can prioritize just getting him the basketball is huge. I feel like D'Angelo Russell's playmaking ability goes highly underrated. He is a phenomenal playmaker, and you put him with somebody like a Wemby in the pick and roll, especially on D'Lo, where you can probably get him on like a very, very team-friendly contract, like a backloaded, more of a front-loaded contract, where like by the time you're trying to move off of D'Angelo Russell, it could be like around this $18, $16, $17 million mark to where he could be easily traded by that point in time to a different team. So looking at that, I think the Spurs are a great, great fit to where if they really do strike out kind of on like the higher profile guards, I would like to see them pair Wemby up with somebody who can be a phenomenal playmaker and just somebody who can space the floor, and D'Angelo Russell. And the last team, I think it would be tough for them to make the money work, and it's a weird kind of fit, but for some reason I have the Milwaukee Bucks here. I just feel like they just need somebody else that can operate or do anything with the basketball playmaking wise, either off that bench or in the starting lineup. I threw D'Lo in here because I feel like it could be a situation where he does opt in. Lakers trade him to so-and-so team. Bucks get into a 3-teamer. They try to be like, we'll take on D'Angelo Russell. He can come off and go to the Bucks and be like kind of that bench point guard. Because I doubt he would start in the backcourt with Damian Lillard, but he can kind of be that bench point guard for them, especially depending on what they do with that roster. Because I do feel like that bench needs some kind of playmaking / shot creation, and I doubt they get it in the draft. They have the 23rd pick. I just doubt they get it in the draft. But D'Angelo Russell, I feel like the best 3 fits. I like Brooklyn just because he had his best years there. I think the Spurs could be a great situation for him and both sides, depending on what happens with the Spurs this offseason. And the Milwaukee Bucks in terms of like a trade pseudo kind of thing. Next one, Kelly Oubre Jr. I was mind blown to see that Kelly Oubre Jr., I think it was him and Christian Wood last year, the end of free agency, like when it was basically over, that like didn't get paid for some reason. I feel like Kelly Oubre didn't have a bad year with Charlotte, it was crazy to see him just not get any like interest, it felt like, from anybody. Goes to the 76ers. Pretty much like it was like bet on yourself kind of year for Kelly Oubre. Played phenomenal basketball on both sides of the ball. I feel like he was a perfect fit in Philly. When I talk about his best fits, I would love if he just went back to Philadelphia. I think he fits perfectly with what they want to do. But I have 3 other teams I feel like could be interesting spots. Cleveland. I think we have an NBA group chat among my friends. When Kelly Oubre was on the market, I have a friend named Jason who is a big Cavs fan. I think we were in that chat multiple times talking about why don't the Cavs just go out and get Kelly Oubre? Why don't they just go address the 3 spot, somebody that can space and defend at a high level? Didn't do that. I feel like Cavs could possibly right the wrongs of what they didn't do, because I feel like he would have been able to help them a ton out this year. But I think the Cavs are a perfect fit for Kelly Oubre. I think he's the perfect 3 they need on that team. Next one, Dallas Mavericks. I mean, he can kind of be that upgrade to a Derrick Jones Jr. I want to say Derrick Jones Jr. is a free agent. He can kind of be that upgrade. The Mavs are going to have a little bit of money because they have a lot of guys on very, very good contracts. I think he can kind of be that upgrade because he can give you that same level of defense, and he can give you just better, more consistent shooting. Because Derrick Jones did shoot the ball very, very well this year, but who knows if it will translate to another year. But I think Kelly Oubre could be a phenomenal fit with Dallas. And another outside pick I do have is the Chicago Bulls. They're in a position to where they're going to be looking for somebody who can play that small forward spot that fits what they want to do. I feel like they're going into a world where like they want to be more defensive oriented, and somebody who can play off of a Kobe White very well. I think Kelly Oubre Jr. can give the Chicago Bulls everything they're looking for out of Patrick Williams, and possibly on a cheaper contract, depending on what Patrick Williams does get on the market. So the best fits I have for Kelly Oubre: 76ers, Cavs, Bulls, and the Mavericks. Next one, Miles Bridges, another unrestricted free agent. Someone who off the court stuff kind of killed the value around the league. I feel like the Charlotte Hornets are kind of going to wash their hands with this situation and not bring him back. But his value is so weird to where like I feel like a contending team could swoop in and give him a pretty solid contract for them. Best fit I have is the Bucks. The Bucks are looking to get younger. Having a wing that can do a little bit of everything, and Miles Bridges could be a whole difference maker for their team. Somebody who can really play that 3 or 4 position, and depending on like what kind of lineups they do have and how much money they are able to free up, it's going to be very interesting to see. I think Miles Bridges could be a very team-friendly deal to kind of like be like on a prove-it deal because his value is so weird. But I like the Bucks. I like the Sixers. The Sixers have been having interest. He's kind of like that option to where like if they swing and they miss on like a Paul George, Jimmy Butler, Miles Bridges could be up. Miles Bridges could be a great fit next to a Joel Embiid because he's somebody that can space and do a little bit of everything. And him and Tyrese Maxey in transition could be dangerous. Next team I have is the Pacers. If you're looking at the Pacers, I mean, they're going to obviously look to pay Pascal Siakam the bag for sure. But it's like, when I'm looking at them, like the Pacers could look to add somebody if they can get Miles Bridges on kind of a cheaper deal to kind of like more of a prove-it deal, like I said, because of his value, to where like he can be that upgrade if they do lose an Obi Toppin over Aaron Nesmith that you could put at the 3, and then you could run Halliburton, Nembhard, Bridges, Pascal Siakam, and Miles Turner. And with how they play and transition, Miles Bridges and Tyrese Halliburton can give you like insane production, because we saw Miles Bridges and LaMelo Ball in transition, and this is a Pacers team that plays twice as faster, and it's a way better team than that Hornets team was. So I feel like Miles Bridges could be a very low-key add for the Pacers for sure. But the best fits I have are the Bucks, 76ers, and the Pacers. Next player, Nick Claxton. Could be easy move to just go back to the Nets on a big time deal. But I do think there's an outside chance some other teams could swoop in. Obviously, my top of my list is the Brooklyn Nets. I feel like they bring him back, they're going to have a world of money to spend with Ben Simmons getting off the books, and depending on what they do this offseason to kind of add Nick Claxton to kind of not be their franchise guy, but to be a piece in the realm when they do end up getting that franchise guy at some point down the line. Nets are the best fit. OKC is obviously a team that's been rumored a ton. Outside chance to swoop in and get him, because they have the money to make it work. I've seen a ton of Memphis rumors, and I think that's a really good fit, pairing him up with Triple J in that front court with Triple J's ability to space. Doesn't kill your spacing if you're the Grizzlies. He fits the Grizzlies' kind of timeline of their age and what their guys that they do have. They would probably have to trade for him because they don't have the money to make it work. Interesting to see what his value would be. But Nets, OKC, Memphis, I do have the Warriors being an outside chance because they do have some contracts that could be very, very tradable in terms of like a sign and trade. And I feel like Nick Claxton could be that big that can play above the rim, block shots, run the floor. He can be that big that they really desperately need. They just need a real athletic big, and I think Nick Claxton can do that for them. But the best fits I have for Nick Claxton, obviously Brooklyn, OKC, Memphis, and the Warriors. So we're down to my last 3. Gordon Hayward, unrestricted free agent. Didn't really work out in OKC. I'm not really going to blame him too much because he really never really got enough playing time to really show you anything. Feel like it just wasn't the best fit in OKC. I still feel like he has value around the league coming off the bench as a guy that can just do a little bit of everything. Looking at the Cavs, I mean, if the Cavs swing and miss on a lot of their stuff, depending on what they do this offseason, Gordon Hayward could be a great rotational piece for them that can do a little bit of everything off that bench. Next team is the Pacers. Could go home. There's always been rumors about him going to Indiana. I think it would be a very interesting spot because I feel like he could go on a really, really cheap deal and just add more depth to the Pacers and what they already got working over there. Then the Kings. I feel like the Kings are in a really weird spot to where it's like, if they lose Malik Monk, what's really coming off that bench, right? I feel like they're in a spot now where like they could get Gordon Hayward on a cheaper deal, and Gordon Hayward can do a little bit of everything for you coming off that bench. Not saying Gordon Hayward's going to change the outlook of your team and franchise, but he could just be a great addition to add some more depth to these three teams. Next one, Bruce Brown, team deal. It's going to be interesting to see if the Raptors pick this up. If they can't find a trade for him, they could easily just not pick up the team deal. He can become a free agent. But looking at this, best fits, Kings. Kind of like the Gordon Hayward thing, but on a bigger level and a better level at this point. He can do a little bit of everything, gives you great defense. I feel like this is a Kings team that struggles defensively still. He can be a guard that can kind of replace Malik Monk off that bench or even start for you depending on what you get from Kevin Huerter. Next one is the Thunder. I feel like this is what I've seen rumored a ton. I feel like he can kind of give them that do-it-all guy off the bench like the Kings. And then another guy who kind of fits into the realm where I talked about Kelly Oubre and the Chicago Bulls. Kind of a guy that can do a little bit of everything. Somebody you can bring in and kind of really help the development of the young guys around him. And he's somebody that we're like I said, you don't want to have a bunch of young guys on the roster depending on what position and direction the Bulls go into. I feel like Bruce Brown could be a great fit on Chicago depending on what they want to pay him. And I feel like once if they do end up moving off of a lot of people on their roster, they're going to have the money to go pay Bruce Brown a decent little deal. And the last one, Tyus Jones. This is really best fits anywhere contending team. I really like him with Memphis going back home to where he got drafted. I think it's a perfect situation. Did he get drafted by Memphis or am I tripping? I might be wrong there. Yeah, I think I'm wrong there. But I like him going back to Memphis where he played the best basketball of his career. I think he's just a perfect backup point guard. Maybe starting is a little bit of a stretch from what we seen in Washington this past year. Not putting that all on him, that Washington's just a bad team. But looking at Memphis, I think he could just go back, be a perfect backup guard, familiarity there. They would want him back, I feel like. Even if they have a Marcus Smart, like John Morant and Marcus Smart, and then you have Tyus Jones coming off the bench, that's a great three-guard rotation. I like the Kings just because I feel like Davion Mitchell is more of kind of like a specialist in my eyes from what I've seen from him in his career. I feel like he's somebody that is just like kind of like a smaller Lou Dort. He is just a super physical defender that can just really, you throw on the other team's best player, no matter how big or tall he is, that Davion Mitchell can really make it hard, make it a struggle. But I feel like Tyus Jones could be that more steady guard that they're looking for over there in Sacramento, especially if they lose somebody like Malik Monk. They're going to need somebody that can just steady and run that second unit over there in Sacramento. But he's a team where I'm like, maybe free agency, maybe he like sign and trade. Like I like Phoenix, I like Philly. I think Orlando's super, super interesting. Looking at some teams right here, like who's another team that's super interesting? I think the Pelicans could go after Tyus Jones on a super, super like cheaper deal compared to some of the guys that they could get. Like I think Miami's super interesting. I feel like they're a team that could use a guard. Definitely, I think they could make some contracts work to do like a sign and trade with Washington. Just looking at it in terms of the realm, like I just feel like there's a ton of teams that Tyus Jones could obviously go to. I think he's the perfect backup point guard in the league. But looking at this realm, like a free agency, we're actually in the offseason now. We got the draft. Just kind of looking forward to content-wise. I probably will have 2 more mock drafts. I want to do 1 mock draft where I have some trades involved where like kind of gets wild. That's more of like a fun content make for me because I do think that we're going to see a lot of trades during the draft. Just looking towards that, I feel like there's a lot of teams trying to move up. Like I've heard Miami, Chicago, and Memphis are trying to move up. So it's going to be very interesting to see what we get going on in there. But that's down the line. We're officially in the offseason. Stay tuned to future content coming on our socials. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Helps out a ton. But thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk podcast. Hope to see you tune in to future episodes.